Old School Lane Casual Chats is brought to you by Old School Lane, producing various content from blogs, videos, and podcasts discussing about movies, TV shows, video games, and everything else in between since 2011. You can check out the podcast on Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Radio Public, Overcast, Breaker, Pocket Cast, and YouTube. We're associated with Channel Frederator, Manic Expression, The Comic Book Cast, and The Arun Mehta Show. Everyone, welcome to a new episode of Casual Chats. I am Patricia, and I am here with a very special guest. You may remember him that he was the co-creator of the Adventures of Pete and Pete, Kablam, and various other programs. He's a writer, he's a producer, and we had him on the show almost 10 years ago when Old School Lane had 50 episodes as our celebration and our 1-year anniversary at that point. But now it's been over a decade, and we've had over 200 episodes, and just recently, Pete and Pete celebrated his 30th anniversary. Polaris celebrated their 25th anniversary when they first released their album to the mainstream. And we thought to ourselves, you know what? I think it'll be a great time to bring this guest back. I'm here with Will McRobb. Will, welcome back to Casual Chats.
Good to be back. 10 years. I didn't realize we'd been that long, a decade since we spoke.
Yeah, I know. It was all the way back in about September or October of 2014, and I posted the episode up on November. And we had just reached about 50 episodes, and since then we have almost 200. Yeah, we have over 200 episodes, and yeah, we've been still, doing our best to keep content alive after all these years. Things have slowed down since then, especially since I recently got married, and I'm trying to do my very best to, get the next step of my life going. So, but I'm still doing my best to keep on going.
I'm glad to hear that. Got to balance work and marriage, but I'm glad that Pete and Pete got through the gauntlet. I appreciate that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I do reminisce about Pete and Pete a lot, especially whenever people talk about it online. I remember when around 10 years ago when Pete and Pete was starting to air a lot more on various Nickelodeon night programs, and then when there was a lot more talk about it on social media and various articles. That's when the resurgence of Pete and Pete happened. And even still to this day, I still see a lot of people talking about it from time to time.
Yeah, we had a I guess between 2000 and let's see, when did it all start? I guess 2011 and maybe 2015. We must have hit some kind of a zeitgeist sweet spot because we did a whole bunch of very well attended reunions. I don't know if you went to any of those, but that was like a window into, you could sort of chart out when people who watched Nickelodeon, when they watched the show maybe originally when they were kids and got into their late 20s, early 30s, when your nostalgia for childhood kicks in. I'm a real expert on when you start getting nostalgic about your childhood, and that's kind of when it starts, at least based on my life, and also just based on all the people who showed up at these reunions. They're all sort of in that same age range. And it kind of corresponded with, I guess, where, I started I started working on Pete and Pete. The idea of doing Pete and Pete in the first place happened when I was like 26. So that's, I can do the math. And based on what the fans of the show at that age were saying, you reach a certain threshold in your development as a human being where you've kind of made enough forward progress in your life, or whatever it is at age 26 to 32 that makes you feel like nostalgic. I guess I don't know. Maybe your adult responsibilities build up to a point by then that you start thinking wistfully about your childhood. But one of the best things that happened during that period. I mean, we've had a few here and there, but there was like a real sweet spot where we had a bunch of them, and maybe the best, most gratifying part of being involved with Pete and Pete for, it's been 30 years. Of course, it doesn't seem like that long, but back when we were doing the reunions, we just got to hear from a lot of fans, who'd grown up with the show, and lots and lots of them came up to us to tell us, if not for the show, they never would have tried to become a writer or an artist or a musician. And man, when you hear, you know, you never know what, when you're playing. That's one of the bad things about a kid audience, is that you never really get to hear what your audience thinks of the show. I mean, that's probably true for a lot of shows. I mean, there's social media, but Pete and Pete kind of predated that. And so you make a show, it goes out into outer space, and you hope for the best. And because Pete and Pete never really was a killer in the ratings, it was always a little bit ambiguous as to whether, what was going on, and, what happens when it goes on TV, what happens after that. You didn't really know, and you hoped that, you know, people were responding to it. And then you cut to 25 years later, and people are saying, thank you, Pete and Pete, for helping me become an artist versus a bookkeeper. And you say to yourself, if, what could be more gratifying, So that was, a lot of people come up to me and talk about the show and, remember it well. And it seems to have like a real permanent place in people's hearts. But to see people come up to you at a reunion and just point blank tell you how you changed, made them make a more creative choice in their life, it just made everything we did just feel even more worthwhile.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that for some people, they felt like before that they saw that Pete and Pete was possible to be creative. I guess depending on where you live and who your parents are and what your upbringing is, what neighborhood that you grew up with. I guess for some people, they felt like they didn't have a choice but to be exactly the same cookie cutter people that they were surrounded by. And so when they see people who are creative or when they watch shows about people who are creative, they're given an opportunity to say, you know what? I don't have to be what everybody else tells me to be. I can be my own self. And I'm sure that that was like frowned upon back then, but nowadays I think that we have a platform where we can be able to show our creative selves and we can be able to have an appreciation towards other people who are willing to take chances on showing off their creativity. And I think that nowadays we see a lot more of that compared to 30 years ago, where, people who were seen as unique were considered weird, or people who were creative were considered to be the odd ones that, society doesn't exactly look fondly upon. It's just crazy about that, how things have drastically changed and shifted over the past 30 years.
No, it's true. I mean, whether, there's just so many different ways that you can bring your, via the internet, of course, you can create your own little community. I mean, like you guys, I mean, I don't, you guys are not that little, but, you found a way to express yourself via modern technology. And you're right. Kids from the early 90s and mid to late 90s, they didn't have, there was no easy way to project your identity into the world. So, it's a big leap forward for anybody who, I mean, you can have two lives now, right? You could have a normal job and find a way to make your way through life, and then you can, if you can't make a living that way, it doesn't really matter. You can still express yourself and your uniqueness through a million different, you know, access points into, people's homes.
Absolutely, yeah. Whether that you do art online or whether that you post videos or whether that you do podcasts like this one right here, I think that for people who still feel that they have to be able to conform into society, to keep a job, to maintain a job, to have a nice living area, to do all these things, and then when you have the opportunity to fully express yourself, you feel more freer and you feel more of yourself than you do trying to live off a quote unquote normal way of living. I think that programs like Pete and Pete was able to help with that. I think that there was a type of rebelliousness that really gravitated towards kids. I think that because of that, because that we had characters even like such as Artie, who was an adult, but he was hanging around with kids and he was protecting them because, he is a superhero in a sense. And I think that at the end of the day, where if he is happy with doing the things that he likes to do, and everybody is trying to be against him, and then they realize about that what he was doing was, trying to help out kids, was something that even though that they didn't understand it at first, they understood where he was coming from. And I think in our society, there are some people who don't understand where some people are coming from. There seems to be a division, whether it be with any type of discussion. But I think that a little more towards seeing from another point of view is still really important.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you heard about this is related to I guess the Pete and Pete generation and how a more uh, uh, colorful example of how it influenced a particular band. Do you know? Have you heard have you seen the Pete and Pete influenced music video by the band Real Estate? Have you
I
seen
have
that yet?
actually.
That's a good example. Those guys all grew up. Real Estate, for those who might not know, is a pretty well-known indie band that plays kind of a jangly kind of like it's yeah, jangle with like a certain sophistication to it, and really smart literate lyrics, and just beautiful kind of melodic and artfully jangly type songs. And we got a call from the band last summer, and they were putting out their new record, and they had a single, and they, having been influenced by Pete and Pete, they thought, wouldn't it be fun to make a music video that had a Pete and Pete influence to it? And so if you go online and check out Real Estate, and the song is called Water Underground, you will see the closest thing to a Pete and Pete reunion that you'll probably see for a while, in that Big Pete and Little Pete, now grown men, have cameos in this video. And the premise of the video is the band is on their way to their next tour date, and they get lost in a little town called Wellsville, and they're driving around trying to figure out how to get back on the highway. And along the way, they run into a crossing guard who happens to be Big Pete, and they run into Little Pete, who's in the story has a cameo as well. And along the way, driving through suburbia, there are many Pete and Pete Easter eggs for fans of the show to say, I remember that when those garage doors kept opening and closing, and when Pete's dad went on the roof of his car to reshuffle his luggage on the roof rack, all kinds of references like that. And on top of that, it's a truly great song. It's a song that you would swear was in the show. It's so in sync with a Polaris song or any
Yeah.
number of songs that we used, that it was kind of a match made in heaven. And it was such a thrill to, I mean, Real Estate already was a fan. I was already a fan of them. And to hear that they were, influenced by our show and wanted to do a video, it was a total thrill.
Yeah, that was quite a thrill to see. I was going through a similar thing when I saw Mark Summers in the Good Charlotte music video last night. I even mentioned that to him. It's like, you have people who were fans of Double Dare when they were kids, and they thought, you know what, let's do a music video about Double Dare itself, and let's just bring Mark Summers over. I was feeling literally the exact same thing when I first saw that music video. It must have been like geez, like about like 3 months ago that I first saw it, and I was just like amazed that they were able to get to such a immaculate detail with having everything like having Mike and Danny over to the car to the setting that they filmed it in, and it was a really really nice tribute. I'll leave a link in the description below for anybody who's interested in checking out the music video Water Underground by Real Estate. I do recommend you check it out. Yeah,
So you,
so
I was just thinking, so let me ask you about Mark Summers. So you were a fan, grew up a fan of Double Dare, is that
yes,
right?
I was, yeah.
And at what age, after you, as you grew up and became a woman of the world, when did you learn that Mark himself was I forget the name of the syndrome he had, but he's, a sort of
Oh
pathological
yeah,
neatness person.
obsessive compulsive disorder, yeah. I
How
think it
crazy.
was I think it
Yeah,
was during that Oprah Winfrey segment where he came over and he was talking about that he had OCD. And I think that was like the first time that I saw it. I think this was probably like around the late 90s when that was when he finally confessed that he was going through something that he couldn't exactly explain. That he remembered that in one of his programs where he was interviewing somebody and they had OCD. They were going to talk about it on the show, and he didn't know what the condition's name was at the time. And so when he first learned about it and he first did a lot of research on it, that was when it opened his eyes saying, wow, I actually have that same condition. And that was something that that my friend Kevin and I talked about years ago when we had Mark Summers on our blog when we started doing blogging before podcasts. And that was a question that Kevin had for Mark because Kevin is also OCD as well. I mean, like seriously, he is like whenever that would I would visit him back then in his house in New York. The first thing I had to do was I needed to make sure that my shoes were off because, no dirt in the floor. If I went into his room, I couldn't touch anything, like nothing, because he had everything organized, even his like VHSs and DVDs in alphabetical order. Nothing could be touched. None of his toys and action figures could be touched. So yeah, I knew from personal experience when I saw my best friend having OCD as a kid. And then when we were adults and we had Mark on the blog, we interviewed him. And then Kevin read his autobiography about his time going through OCD. And then he was asking the questions about, like, what can I do to better myself? And that was when I first learned about Mark's condition.
yeah, and I mean, his OCD was related. I mean, he was phobic about like all the things that made Double Dare messy. Those were things that he was phobic about. Is that correct?
Yeah,
That's
from what
wrong.
I
That's wrong.
understand, I know that there were some moments in which he said that it didn't bother him, but then there were some moments in which he said that, in the early seasons that he didn't want to like have the kids touch him if they were filled with like gack or slime or anything like that. That he had to take like showers and stuff like that so he can keep himself clean. But you know what? I mean, for somebody who went through that, being surrounded by a bunch of mess, and I would say that that was actually pretty brave of him to do so.
Yeah, I mean, if I mean, it's like it's such, it's like if word of that, I agree. I mean, your whole world is mess, and that that must have been especially tough not knowing why he was feeling so terrible about it, right? He didn't know it was a condition, he just knew that, he was having a hard time, doing something he loved. It must have been crazy not to know what it was.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, I guess I could somewhat relate in which when I was younger, I always felt like I was a little bit odd and I didn't really exactly gel with a lot of people. And then when I was about 16 years old, that was when I was diagnosed with autism. So I guess I can kind of feel like similar to that in which that I always felt that I was different and weird compared to other kids. And then once I found out exactly why I felt that way, then at first I was angry because I thought to myself, why can't I be normal like everybody else? But then after a while, I started to learn more about it. And then I started to overcome my frustrations and my anger issues towards, finding out that I had my condition. And nowadays, I'm a lot more accepting of it.
Well, I didn't know that you had autism. It makes me, really appreciate. We all have a hard time with adolescence, and for anyone who's got a condition that isn't, that doesn't have a name, and you just think it's somehow something that you're doing wrong, I can only imagine, how confusing and complicated, and it's certainly, um, you know, when you can put a name on something you have, and you're aware that others have it, and you're aware that it's not just you and whatever's wrong with you in terms of your, you know, something organic about yourself, and it's something else that you're just suffering from. I mean, I don't know, must be a relief on some level, I would guess, to know that it's not your fault. Is that kind of how it plays out a little bit?
I
That like
guess you
you're,
I guess you could say that, yeah.
yeah, yeah, I can only imagine what that's like. So anyway,
Have you ever felt something like that?
yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think. When I was growing up, I I kind of felt like, I mean, I've had a lot of different. I mean, my main default was that I kind of felt like a dork, but that is not nearly that's not an actual, like, I don't think that's in a medical, any kind of medical handbook, like dorkism. So I can't really attest to having any kind of traumatic, hereditary problem. I was just like, um I remember as a kid, I would look at my shadow, like when I was walking around, and I would think, that is a shadow of a dork, So I was even like embarrassed by my shadow. So but that was nothing serious. And in fact, I had a pretty great childhood, as Pete and Pete will indicate.
Oh yeah, for sure. I could understand that.
Actually,
Yeah, I guess, at some point people do feel awkward about various things, whether it be that they kind of have a tendency of thinking that they are a dork in some way, shape, or form. I can see that for a lot of people, and I think that's why Pete and Pete resonated with a lot of people who grew up with the show. Now, you with your dorkism, as you call it,
right.
was your childhood more like a little Pete or a big Pete situation?
I was more of a big Pete. I was like an observer, less of an actor. So I was always paying attention to what was going on around me, and I guess that was the even before I was thought of myself as a writer. I think I was thinking like a writer, and so I had a great group of friends, and a lot of the things that were in Pete and Pete, came out of me being an active kid, getting himself into ridiculous situations. And so I think I have a real sense of humor about myself. I mean, it's okay to be a dork, if as long as you don't demonize yourself. I saw the pros of it, and it just made me feel like an outsider. And as I got older, it felt good to be an outsider. As long as you can find other dorks, you'll be okay.
Yeah. What would you say was like your dorkiest thing that you ever did when you were a kid?
Well, I can tell you one of the more embarrassing things that happened to me that contributed to a my which didn't help my reputation very much. When I was in seventh grade, I was um, I was in intramural volleyball. I was participating in intramural volleyball in the gym after school, and by a couple of, I guess you'd call it a stroke of bad luck or fate, or I don't know, just the way life can be unexpected. There was an accident in the gym, something heavy. I don't need to get into the details. All I knew was I was ready to play some volleyball, and then something very heavy fell on my foot, and my foot was mangled, and it was an awful, terrible accident. And what was worse than the pain of this heavy object smashing my foot and ultimately causing me to lose half of my toe um,
Ooh.
was it was surgical, but it was still, I'm still, there's a part of me missing, and sometimes I scream out, "Where's the rest of me?" But it's really just a half of my toe. But in any case, the embarrassing part was, there I am, a victim of a school oversight, and in terrible pain, like having had my foot smashed. And the gym teacher, realized I was in trouble and needed to get me out of the intramural volleyball game and into an ambulance. And in order to do that, he put me over his shoulder, injured me, and unfortunately took the most direct route to get to the cab, which was right through the after school like lunchroom, which was just filled with cool people. And what they saw was a kid being carried like over his head like a mattress by the gym teacher with this mangled toe, and everyone was looking at me like, "What is this all about?" And even though I'm in pain and I'm a victim of like school negligence, because I was so embarrassed, and even though I was a victim of the school, I just acted like this was like some huge joke, and like I don't know what's going on, and I was like kind of cracking up, basically making fun of myself because of this embarrassing parade through the cool kids, and acting like I was, a punchline to some hilarious joke. And in fact, I was just an injured person who was trying to go to the hospital. And so I think that's a good example of just being in the wrong place at the wrong time, and then trying to turn it into a joke, even though it was, I was just like a month away from having my toe amputated. So I bring that up just because it involves involves pain, it involves self-deprecation, it involves like being aware that you're in a ridiculous situation and making a comment on it, even as blood is leaking from your body. I don't know if anybody wants to interview me on the subject for some kind of medical magazine. I'm more than happy to talk more about it, but I think I'll stop now.
All right then. Yeah, I have some embarrassing moments involving with some type of school sport. One time I signed up to play flag football, and we were playing off against one of the high school teams, and we had an opportunity to score a few points if we were able to make the kick. And they asked me to do it because apparently, out of the flag football team, I did the best in the kicking. So, um, I ran over and I tried to see if I can kick the ball. And little did I know that I didn't see this, but there was like a slippery part in the mud where, before I was gonna run over and kick the ball. And so there I go. I was running over to kick the ball, and then I slipped and I fell on my back, and everybody's laughing while I'm trying to kick the ball. And then when I do kick the ball, because I'm all wet, it didn't exactly go very far. So that was pretty embarrassing for me.
It sounds very Charlie Brown in the football. I
Yeah,
wonder if
I mean, the only difference was is that they didn't pull the ball away from me. I just slipped and fell because I think it was like raining like a few days before, so the grass was still pretty wet.
I'm sorry to hear that. That sounds. At least you didn't lose your toe. That's the only thing I can say.
Well, I mean, if you want to talk about two instances where I actually did have like childhood scars from something, I could tell you that. Long story short, when I was about 7 years old, our next door neighbor had gotten a brand new motorcycle, and I was looking at it, and little did I know that I was wearing shorts, and so my lower leg actually got pretty close to the pipe, and I gotten like a first degree burn on my leg. And I had to be rushed over to the hospital just so they can be able to like make sure that it doesn't like get infected. And so I still have a scar on the bottom of my left leg of that burn. And then there was another incident when I was like, it been about like a year later when I was 8 years old. I was in the living room watching TV, and I was given like a like one of those like vitamin shakes, if especially if you have like certain deficiencies, if you don't eat certain foods. Well,
Right.
they used to have like these metal pop caps, and it was like pretty round and sharp. So I placed it on the floor, and then when I was getting up, I actually like cut my foot with that, and I had to get stitches on my right foot because it went pretty deep in there. So yeah, I mean, I didn't lose any body parts, thank goodness, but I do have a few battle scars from when I was a kid.
We should put a picture of your exhaust pipe burn and my toe onto your website.
Yeah, that'd be an interesting idea.
I
Out
think
of
that would be.
context, people will be looking as like, what is this supposed to be?
No,
But
you could use
yeah,
it as a promotion. If you want to know more about this mangled toe, tune into an interview I did with Will McRobb. I'll tell you all about it. I mean,
all
that could
right
be just
then, awesome.
another entry point for people who are into mutilation.
Yeah, there you go. That's a really great plug right there. Yeah, so Yeah, I'm another thing that I was thinking about, in addition to like all the moments that people really gravitated themselves into figuring out about themselves, was how the music was able to complement it. I mentioned earlier in the podcast about Polaris. Recently, they celebrated 25 years of when their full Pete and Pete album was released to the public. After like
Oh,
many years of, the only time in which you can get like snippets of it is if like you had to like put in a mail-in order on cereal and you get like maybe like three or four songs. And
oh yeah, the tape that you could get. Well, I think it was cornflakes. Maybe it
yeah,
was
I think it was
chocolate chip.
probably like cornflakes or shredded wheat or something like that. But yeah, that was like the only time in which you were able to get like a little taste of what Polaris's songs were, until the I believe it was the cassette and the CD was released on April 6th, 1999. And I just saw Polaris posting on their social media pages about the celebration of that. And yeah, I would say that just as much of the writing and the actors, I think that the music also is a great complement to how Pete and Pete was still able to resonate with a lot of people.
Yeah, I know. It was like it's I think I've said this before, but Pete and Pete was the first. I got my start in the promo department at Nickelodeon and Nick at Night. I'd never done a TV show before, and we the Pete and Pete's existed originally as 60-second little miniature stories that were produced and paid for by the promo department. So Pete and Pete began as a promo for itself, I guess. We were just making short films, and then it took a while. I mean, we did about 20 of those, and then we moved on to do the specials and then the series. And the gift of Pete and Pete, the gift that was Pete and Pete was a result. A lot of the things that would make Pete and Pete great and kind of um, impossible to replicate, from at least from me, is that I didn't really know what I was doing, and there's a lot to be said for, I'm a big fan of a band's first album. We all love, it's easy to love a first album. It might not be as good as their third album when they figure out how to play their instruments, or their second album where they, you know, got a keyboard player to flesh out their sound. Whatever the trajectory is, where you go from like not knowing what you're doing to being too good and knowing too much about what you're doing. That's a trajectory many a band could say they were guilty of. Like now they're slick and they know how to do it, and they're more concerned about selling things than just making things. And Pete and Pete was made by a bunch of people who had only done 60-second versions of these stories, and now we're asked to do 30 minutes of these stories. And because we didn't know anything except we knew Pete and Pete, and that's all we needed to know, but we didn't really know anything else. A lot of what made Pete and Pete great was just people making it who didn't really know what they were doing, and like a band that is just happy to have a record, have a record deal, and maybe we'll only put out one record and that'll be it. But let's do it. That amateurism is one word for it. Another word for it would be just a sense of like, kind of making it up as you go along.
Mhm.
That can lead to things that you'll never get again, because you can't unlearn what you've learned. But if you start knowing nothing, you have that one chance to make something that comes just out of like instinct and your influences, and just you could take all the limitations you have and in a way turn them into strengths. And that was the beauty of Pete and Pete. And in the years after Pete and Pete, we tried to sort of replicate the formula of this heightened reality of childhood, and playing it kind of straight within that world. And it never quite, partly it was just because it wasn't Nickelodeon. Nickelodeon was such a great home for the show, and we were trying to make it for like ABC television. I mean, that was a part of the problem. But somehow somehow it's almost like we take, it's a little bit like the Bible. We had taken a bite of the apple, and we really could not find our way back.
I think an almost good attempt of trying to get that lightning in a bottle twice was A Kid Called Mayonnaise.
What are you trying to say?
Oh, I just think that everything that you were able to learn from Pete and Pete, I think that you were able to do really well with
Oh,
Mayonnaise, where
I
you were able to
thought you were
get.
saying. I thought you were saying, yeah, you're definitely
No, no,
that is
no, of
accurate.
course, no,
That
no,
is
of
such a
course,
pale imitation of what you had originally done. Well, that's a
no,
good
no.
example. That's a good example. I don't know if we talked about this, but did you enjoy that?
I loved it. Yeah. I mean, you remember when Mayonnaise came out on Amazon, I sent you my review of it 3 days after the thing came out, and you were like, wow, you worked really fast, didn't you?
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, it got some good reviews. We it would have gone on. I don't know if I don't know if I complained about this at the time, but
No, I don't think so because this was probably before you released Mayonnaise on Amazon. So no, I don't think so.
yeah, I mean, I think Mayo was the closest to what the spirit of the original show, but it's still, yeah, I don't know. I guess what I meant to say, I was like about to like be extra critical about it, but I really did like it. And the problem is that I'll just give you an insight into how TV shows go from pilot to being put on TV. They're never the stories. Depending on where you are and what and who's trying to put you on the air, every story's different. But it was Amazon Kids at the time, and so we were so three pilots were made. One of them was Mayo, which to your audience was kind of like Pete and Pete. It was about a kid who moves to Los Angeles and he lives in a hotel. His mom runs this kind of crappy but charming hotel, and he gets to live out the fantasy of living in a hotel and all the weirdos that live there, and he gets to know LA, from that perspective, and has an adventure where he's trying to he's into rubber duckies and for your tub toys, and all I'll say is it leads on an incredible adventure, and I don't think there's any way to see it. So if you want to hear more of the plot, it's you'll just have to imagine it. But what
Or
happened?
you can watch my video of it.
Oh, right. So what happened was what they do at Amazon at the time. So there's three pilots, and they all go up on Amazon. Was it on the, it was like you could watch them on a link, all three shows, and then you could review them and then give a rating, I think, on which one you liked. And what it was like a real horse race in that what Amazon, rather than a million other ways in which you could, I mean, in a way, it was more fair than like sending it to a focus group, which is what typically happens. In fact, they just had fans voting on it. You would watch it, and if you liked it, that was a vote. And these three shows were like competing against each other at the same time in the month of September. And as the creator of the show, I could go to the scorecard, so to speak, that you could go to see how many people had watched it. And it was really a neck and neck race with these other shows, and they had no promotion at all. It wasn't like Amazon promotion was involved in getting people to watch it. It was like a dog eat dog scenario where they just said, "Yeah, we're going to have it up for a month. If you get the most likes, you get to have series, and it's up to you to figure out how to get people to watch." And so, using Facebook and everything else I could think of online, I try to get people interested in watching it. And by the end of the month, we had the most votes, and that was a good. That seemed like Mayo would finally make it to the big time. And then about a day after, feeling like the king of the world, having beaten us two other shitty shows. Just kidding. They were very good shows, and I just had enough Pete and Pete fans, I think, that I got over the top. Amazon said, "Yeah, we're gonna we're shutting down our kids department." So that's the sad ending of that story.
Oh, I'm really sorry to hear about that.
That's all right. That's all right. You I I mean, at the time, I went on a murder spree, in central Los Angeles, but I'm okay now.
Okay, well, I'm glad you were able to vent out your
Yeah,
frustrations.
yeah. Just everyone. I think the people that I murdered were very sympathetic when I told them the story I just told you guys. They're like, "Yeah, that sucks, man." They shut down the kids department. I
Yeah.
think they were happy. They were not happy to die, but they were happy to hear that I was getting some satisfaction out of murdering them. So
Well, that's
that's
good. That's good to know.
yeah.
Anyway, but yeah, I think that there was a lot of great things about Pete and Pete that I saw a lot in Mayonnaise, and I even mentioned it in that video many years ago where I really like the music. I like the way that it didn't exactly feel like a facsimile of Pete and Pete, but you can definitely tell that the essence was there. And yeah, I did really enjoy it to the point in which when I first saw it, I'm like, yeah, I need to tell people about it. And so it was probably the fastest video that I ever put out where I was like saying, oh yeah, I saw it. I love it. I need to tell people about it. And yeah, it's at the time it was probably one of my more successful videos where people were like saying that yeah, they really wanted to check it out. They were missing Pete and Pete, and I think that the closest equivalent to something indie was probably like a lot of programs that was featured on indie television or even with Wes Anderson's films. But now we're seeing a lot more of productions where people are going on to crowdfunding campaigns and asking people to help them out and doing a lot of these passion projects. It's something we said earlier about the people who are considered to be kind of like a little bit odd or quirky or creative and going out there and doing something really creative. And I've been seeing a lot of that because I work at a university and a lot of the students that I work with are film and television students or journalism students. And I see them practically all the time for their homework assignments, grabbing their cameras, grabbing their lighting equipment and their microphones, and just going out there and filming something that they have a love and passion for. And, they just recently came back from a student film festival and they won awards for their hard work and dedication. So yeah, I think that it is possible. It is a lot of work, and it's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. And I know that there's a lot of uncertainty for some people who might even ask, do people even want this? Because do you want to do something that is for yourself, or do you want to do it for a general audience? Like, what's going to get the most eyes? But I
Right.
think that if you do something for yourself, eventually you do get people coming into it and saying, yeah, that looks really cool. So I would just say follow your passion, follow your dreams, and eventually, and don't worry about, millions of people not watching it. Just focus on you enjoying it, and eventually you will get somebody to watch it.
That's great advice. I'm glad you're spreading the word about that. One thing, just thinking about the music of the show. One thing I'll mention is that I have recently worked on some pretty cool projects that had great music in it. So I will name check them right now. I was the showrunner of the animated Harriet the Spy series that's on Apple Plus,
Oh yeah.
which is very true to the trying to be true to the spirit of the book more than maybe the movie was. And that's not the movie, but it was animation, so we could recreate 1964 New York and be authentic to that world. But the theme song for that show, for the Harriet the Spy show, is sung by Courtney Barnett. So that's a feather in our indie cap. And then I also worked on a special for Apple Plus that was an adaptation of a graphic novel called El Defo, which is a real life story of a woman who went deaf at age 5 and all the struggles involved in kind of finding herself when she was a kid, and her sort of imaginary superhero best friend, El Defo, who kind of was her, champion. And in that show, there's a theme song by Waxahachie. So it was great to get that kind of music into like slightly more like big name type productions.
Yeah, and I think that an advantage of having unique music that may not necessarily be on the mainstream is that you can be able to focus on the music based off of the music and not based off of the people who sing it. I think that seems to be a case for like a lot of mainstream music in which like you get the name value of the person, and hey, if it's done by this person, then there's going to be like an automatic expectation of like saying, oh yeah, I'm gonna expect good things from it. But I really like the kind of music that you don't need necessarily know who the person is, but if you enjoy listening to a type of genre or a type of melody or even like a type of like a type of voice that really resonates to you, or maybe the type of instruments that they play, and that would get you more into listening to other people doing their own things. And that's one of the reasons why I liked listening to Polaris when I was younger, is that even though that I wouldn't have known anything about particularly like Miracle Legion when I was younger, because I mean I didn't hear a lot of them playing on like the radio or anything like that, or the top 40 stuff, or seeing them in music videos. But because that I was introduced to Pete and Pete, I got introduced to other indie music that I really liked, and that opened the door for me checking out other people who are not necessarily like mainstream artists, but people who are able to, put out music because they love doing it, and you get to listen to what they have to do.
Sure, yeah. Sorry,
No, go
I was
ahead.
parked in the wrong location. No, I'm with you on that. What is your favorite band right now?
Well, I mean, I do like a lot of not necessarily like name bands, but I do like to like go over to Spotify or go over to various other music streamings, and then just put like a particular genre of music and just have it playing in the background for me to like do my writing or to take care of like household chores or something like that. So I don't have anybody specific, but particular genres of music that I really like is indie rock or ska, or I like a little bit of like folk rock, or I like a mixture of a whole bunch of music. The only music that I'm not too big of a fan of are metal, because it's too loud for me. I can't really take screaming. I'm not a big fan of like old school country. Like I'm not interested in hearing about people talking about riding on the on the west with their horses. That stuff bores me to death. And I'm not a huge fan of let's see what else. Like gratuitous music that has a lot of swearing just for the sake of swearing, as opposed to like, if you are going to do it, have a message behind it, not just doing it just for being gratuitous.
I'm totally with you on that. I was thinking of music that breaks through. You're talking about traditional country, and yeah, I don't have a lot of entry points for that, but sometimes you'll come across something that gives you a bridge to that kind of music, and it's kind of you almost need a helping hand sometimes to get to a place where maybe you don't feel like you'd be welcome. I know you must be a traveler on Instagram. Have you seen that kid, who I believe is also autistic, who with his dog and his brother play 80s alternative music on a lap steel instrument? Have you seen this guy, Noah?
No, I have not.
Yeah, check it out. It's like it's become incredibly. I mean, I was watching it. There were like 16, followers, and now, 2 years later, he's this kid who lives, like an 18-year-old, 15-year-old kid who lives in Texas, and it's just so amateurish and charming. He's got a cowboy hat on, and he's just sitting, in front of the camera, and the dog is in the foreground, just staring at you, and his little brother is behind him on guitar. And every song you've ever loved from the 80s and 90s, he'll do. Lap steel is that really like weepy sounding, sounds like strings, but it's what you're used to hearing in old time country songs. It just has this kind of like, kind of plaintive, ringing kind of sound, and it's very archaic sounding. And so you put that sound to let's take Love Will Tear Us Apart, which is an amazing version of that. And it totally transforms the song, and it brings to light parts of it you hadn't thought of before, especially like a sad song. The lap steels are pretty good at making sad things sadder, just because of, they call it like the weeping strings, and there's like a real like, you know plaintive quality to these. You sit down, it's like on a table in front of you, you play it with picks, with your hands, and it's so traditional. And if you find this guy on Instagram, Noah, I can't remember his last name, but now he's got a record on Spotify. With a record, he's got like 8 songs on Spotify, and he's kind of become South by Southwest performances. And for this guy in his living room with the paneling and the dog and his brother, he's found an audience, and he just keeps playing. Pick your favorite '90s song or '80s song, and there's a version of it that will make you reevaluate the entire song. And in some ways, just because of the instrumentation, brings like a whole new like perspective to it.
Wow, that's actually really interesting.
Oh,
Yeah, it actually goes to show you what you were saying earlier about that you take something that you're doing for the first time and you do your very best with what little knowledge that you have. You make it raw, you make it unpolished. And I actually remember many years ago when I saw somebody commenting regarding about movies and TV shows of today where for a general audience, if something is considered to be unpolished or not refined or anything like that, people call it something very negative. It's like, oh, well, you can definitely tell that this has a low budget. A low budget automatically means cheap, or, the acting is a little bit wooden and stilted. Instead of, some people saying, well, they're either doing this for the first time, maybe you can see a charm to it. No, it's actually just really distracting. So I think that because some people can't really invest themselves into that, everything needs to be like polished to the point in which it's just like artificial. It doesn't feel natural, but at the same time, that's what we see a lot of nowadays because there's unfortunately, and I guess that in a way, I'm glad that P&P came out the way that it did, was that when you have a lot of executives coming in and saying, "Yeah, I don't know if we want to set it in." Let's say Wellsville shooting it in New Jersey. I mean, like, let's set it somewhere like more mainstream that everybody can relate to. Let's put it in New York City. Let's put it in California or something like that. Or oh, these kids, they're wearing like these clothes, like let's just have clothes from the latest fashions, or these particular styles of hair, let's put it to that way. Or oh, this music, nobody's going to know about these particular people, let's just put in the top 40 and stuff like that. I think that because that a lot of people tend to think that they know what people like, it kind of strips away the unique and naturalness that a project could be if their creators can be able to have full access to it. And you know what? I mean, at the end of the day, I think that if a program was not able to be great in the ratings or in the viewership, I think that when people are able to look back on it, like for example, I remember when reruns of Pete and Pete were featuring on the N for a new generation who didn't grow up with it back in the 90s. That was when a lot more people really resonated to it, as well as when they probably first saw it on Snick or at Nickelodeon when it first aired. So I think that the raw and the um, unkempt and unpolishedness is what's able to, make a show really engaging to people because it feels real. It's not fake or manufactured. It's not polished to what general people want or anything like that. I think that people are kind of missing that. And I'm hoping that we get to see a little bit more of that. Like, sure, maybe we don't have the best black magic cameras. Shoot in a handheld every once in a while. Or okay, maybe we don't have like top quality top 40 music. Yeah, get somebody who is really small on Instagram and putting out songs that they like. I think that it would be really nice to see people taking a chance on that.
no, I agree. I mean, I'm glad that there's like back before in the before times we didn't really have this advantage, but in the now times, you can go to Kickstarter or other places like that, and you can get fans or folks who might be interested in what you're doing to help pay for what you're making, and you can crowdsource. And if you're trying to get something made that's personal and you don't work for a network or have a lot of money, you can get people interested in what you're doing and having contribute some money to it, and then it becomes something that you and 1,000 other people who give money. You're all like patrons of this vision, and I can only imagine that when you finish something like that, a lot of. I mean, I've contributed to a lot of different Kickstarters, and you get all kinds of goodies, like promotional items for different amounts of money that you want to pledge. And then you're so invested in it because you're kind of like help make it. And I'm always happy for people that find their way making something special with the help of just people who want to help.
Yeah, absolutely. I do agree. And yeah, I think that going back into the recent Academy Awards where the one person said instead of making one $200 million movie, make 20 million-dollar movies. And I think that's true. It's like yes, if you're gonna have a project where you're gonna put in so much money into it, and it turns out to be pretty mediocre. I mean, just put it into like maybe one or two or even 10 projects that only has a small budget. I remember another saying where I heard that limitation breeds creativity.
Sure.
And I think that not only that applies to like movies and TV shows, but I think it also applies to various other types of forms of entertainment, video games, releasing songs and releasing art pieces and various other things. Like, if they don't have a lot of resources, just um, put in all of that into your creativity and your passion. And if you make a lot of it, then just continue on from there. But remember where you came from.
Yeah, I'm glad you're doing this podcast. Everybody's got to hear what you're saying. I mean, everything you're saying needs to be, you know, how many people listen to your podcast?
Well, let's see. If I have my YouTube subscribers, that would be about maybe over 12,000. And then as for my other podcast feeds, that would be like maybe 250.
That's pretty good. Yeah, so there's 12, whatever, 12,000 plus people who are hearing you talk about the things that make inspire people, make them want to make things. So I'm glad you're doing that kind of work. It's people need to hear what you're saying. I'm glad that you're saying it.
Well, thank you. And I have you to thank for inspiring me to want to be able to go out there and create things that I do enjoy.
Happy to do it. I'm glad Pete and Pete has had that effect on people. When you make something, you don't really know what's going to happen to it. Certainly had no concept that I'd be talking about it with you 30 years later. And if I did know that back then, it would have been a terrible thing, right? It's like it would have influenced everything I did. You just sort of hope for the best. And with Pete and Pete, it was really like I don't. I mean, I guess I knew what indie was back then, and I certainly know what it is now. But as far as Nickelodeon goes, it's about as indie as it gets. And there's good and bad about that. I mean, we all Pete and Pete fans know like the mystery of the missing third season DVD. That and a million other indignities that kind of came along with, from a network perspective when you're not the highest rated show. Like all the things that you love about the show are the things that other people think prevent it from being successful on a network. And Nickelodeon owned by at the time by Time Warner. It's not like Nickelodeon was like a college radio station. And so we were grateful. I mean, I will never knock Nickelodeon because they put it on the air. But when I talk to fans, they're like, "Where's that third season?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I think they say it's in a warehouse somewhere. I don't really know." And
Yeah, I
other
think that
other
people need to
indignities,
understand that.
yeah.
Uh, we don't know where the third season is, so trust me, we would love to know where it is, but we don't.
I always thought the third season was of the three. I mean, they're all my children, so I'm not trying to knock the third season, but I think the third season was not as good as the first two seasons. So at least the first two seasons got out. That's important.
Yeah, unfortunately though, because that the first two seasons on DVD are out of print, it's very hard to find them. So I'm hoping that Shout Factory, Paramount, Nickelodeon, whoever, please re-release Pete and Pete on DVD so that people don't have to scrounge around for 80 to $100 so that they can be able to own the first two seasons.
Sure. I mean, another like example of like, I mean, this is very indie and ultimately pretty charming, but ultimately also speaks to, how what the pecking order is. Like I don't think, for example, let's think of a very popular Nickelodeon. Well, this is just, depending how much money you make, that's how much special treatment you get. So I'm not knocking Nickelodeon. But what I was going to say was like the DVDs were, they came out and they're great, and the commentaries were really good. But they were mastered from the YouTube versions that were out there. And if I see one more complaint about how crappy the the imaging is on those shows, I mean, I wouldn't be upset. I would just say I would apologize. But the if you get the DVD and you're happy to have it, you probably won't care. But if you look at the comments, people are like, "What is this? Like, it's murky. What's that blue line at the bottom?" So even when it gets on DVD, it's still like looks like something that somebody was selling from a suitcase on the corner.
Gotcha.
But anyway,
Yeah,
it's out there.
it wasn't like from the actual negatives.
No, I think they lost. I don't know. I mean, I guess it's just part of like the mystique of the show. Like, oh yeah, it's in a warehouse. Oh, they lost the masters. We don't know what happened to Mr. Tasty's head. I think somebody threw up in it and they threw it away. Just all these great stories about like what happened to this, what happened to that, and the more it's just like lore. I just like, wow, the head somebody threw up into the head. That's horrible. And they threw it away. Couldn't they just hose it out? Just even, I mean, it's a show about mystery of growing up, and even outside of the actual shows themselves, there's like just the mysteries that are built into just the actual like props. So it's mysteries continue.
Yeah, and also another mystery that I've seen people debate about for the past decade, especially during that what was it like that sweet spot that you were mentioning earlier in the show about the late 2000s, early 2010s, where there was like this old MTV article from years ago, like all the way dating back to like 2007 or 8, where they were like saying definitively the Adventures of Pete and Pete created the modern day hipster, and they listed off the reasons why. Like, oh, Mr. Tasty was the pre food truck, and all the flannel clothes, everybody's wearing them now. Everybody's into indie music and all that kind of stuff. So when people say back then around the early to mid 2010s that Pete and Pete created the modern day hipster, I just thought to myself, that's a really interesting statement. I mean, whether it's true or not, I don't know. That's a really interesting thing that people can talk about.
I would only believe that were true if that article said and people are wearing two small children's pajamas with wingtip shoes and horn rim glasses. And I'd be like, that is a zeitgeist right there. But no one's done that yet, so we haven't completely broken through. So
Okay, then. Well,
maybe someday.
I'm sure we will at some point. Well, I mean,
Uh,
it's still too early to tell.
I don't know. I've seen a lot of arty adults wearing arty homemade arty outfits for Halloween. So that's good enough for me.
Oh wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember there was when I was in Manchester visiting my husband, there was this flannel rain hat that I wore that kind of like almost looked like Little Pete's hat, so I just thought that that was actually pretty funny.
Did you ever see I was thinking of other that flannel hat made me think of the Funny or Die video we did of
Oh yes, I remember that one. That
the
was
bird
so good.
little Pete's, like little Pete's in a bar, getting free shots for saying little Peteisms, and
Hmm.
it's a pretty if you've seen it, if you haven't seen it, it's a good natured poke at what happens when kid stars grow up, what becomes of them, and you get to see all kinds of you get to see the Pete's and a few other people from the show kind of dealing with being in their, I guess at the time they were in their 20s. So if you want to
Yeah.
want to see a bit of us, and Tasty gets, I think he throws a punch. So
Yeah,
it's
he
it's
does.
very
He does throw a punch. He throws a
very
punch
nihilistic. It's very
to Big
nihilistic,
Pete.
but at least the people who made the show were making the
Yeah, that
nihilistic
was
points.
actually pretty funny when he gives Mike the blue tornado bar, and then he just tells him, "Here you go. Here's all the blue tornado bars for everybody, and including Big Pete, the fuckface who told me I was an extra in a costume."
I know. Have Tasty say fuckface. I mean, maybe sacrilege, but it's every creator has to. It's like Frankenstein. You got to turn against your creator eventually. But
Sure.
we've it was a one-off, and also if Will Ferrell wants you to do something, you're going to do it. And it was actually, I think we did it in advance of the San Francisco Sketch Fest, so it was connected to a reunion we did in San Francisco. So it wasn't just some crazy disturbing one-off. It was all part of a promotion for the an
Yeah.
actual event. So anyway, yeah, if you want to see Mr. Tasty swear and punch somebody and see Danny doing shots, so that by saying little Peteisms, you will not be disappointed.
Yeah, and if you want to see Mike trying to be quote unquote the normal one, well, everybody else is just absolutely going insane, then there's also that. And then there's the skit where Rick was talking about that he was making like these little
In person,
boxes in prison.
he was the greatest. He ad libbed some of that. If you watch it, he's it's the best part of it is Mike just kind of bitterly talking about his years in prison. It's a really funny bit.
Yeah. But no, no.
Um,
I just have to say, Will, thank you so much for coming on by to the show. I really do appreciate it.
it's always great to talk to you. I know you've been a supporter of the show over, I guess, over 10 years now, and it seems like you were a fan of it way before that, and I'm grateful. It's always good to be talking about it. It feels like it's my part of my family, so it's easy to get into it. And you probably didn't expect to hear a story about my amputated toe, but I got it out there, and I don't get any kind of like residuals for telling that story. I just told it out of the just joy of telling you why I am just one example of what makes me feel like a dork. And there's more. If you ever have a dork podcast, I'd be happy to talk on that as well.
All right, then I'll definitely consider it. Yeah, so tell people where they can find you at. What are you working on currently? Plug and promote your stuff.
Well, at the moment, believe it or not, I think I buried the lead on this one, but Chris Ciscardi and I are writing a script for Pete and Pete reunion movie.
Really? That's
The only
awesome.
the only hesitation I should, if you talk about it or if this goes on the air, it's only a script. There's no guarantee it will get made. It's just
Gotcha.
I think Nickelodeon had run out of things to turn into movies, and
Well, I mean, currently at this point, and I mean, not to go offhand, but PR at Nickelodeon's a nightmare right now. So I think a Pete and Pete script will be like the halo that they need.
I hope so. I hope so. So anyway, it's only thing I'll say about it, is it's the Pete's. If you watch you should watch the video of the real estate video, Water Underground, and you get a glimpse of what the Pete's look like today. And then they look fine. And then and then just imagine those two in a movie where they're grown-ups, and and they have their own kids. So there's like Big Pete has his own daughter, and I'm not spoiling. It's no spoiler to tell you that, or I'm not giving away the secrets of the movie, but I'll tell you that
The butler did it.
no, what I'm trying to say is, this is a very roundabout way of getting to it, is that Big Pete's daughter, her name is Pete. So you have three Pete's in this movie, and
Ah.
they're all set in Wellsville, and the grown-ups are grown-ups. They have kids, and we'll bring back as many regulars as we can. And it's Mr. Tasty will be in it. The good thing about Mr. Tasty, last thing I'll say, for all the things that make him wonderful and mysterious, and kind of heartbroken, and all the things that make him an interesting character, because he is the one character from Pete and Pete whose face you never see because he wears a plastic head. You don't have to worry about him being 30 years older.
Okay, awesome.
There you go. He's timeless. He doesn't, I mean, he will outlive us all. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
All right.
Yes, when the whole world is burning away, Mr. Tasty will be there to save us all.
It would be funny though to do like a Rosebud thing where Tasty's, dying, and he just goes, I don't know, what would Tasty say? Blue Tornado Bar, and then he
Yeah,
would just
Blue Tornado Bar. Yeah, there you
and
go.
then he passes on. Maybe we'll save that for if this movie does well, maybe we'll just keep doing movies until everyone is has grandchildren, and then they're named Pete, and then we'll really have something.
All right, that sounds great.
Okay, great talking to you, and we'll
All
uh, we'll
right.
talk we'll talk to you in 10 years.
Yeah, we'll talk in 10 years. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.